Grace Point, happy Palm Sunday. I'm going to take you to our gathering in just a minute. But before I do that, I wanted to update you on Grace Point's continued response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we've been online only in these weeks, one of our decisions was that we would still get our essential team together at Clementine and that we would create our gatherings there because it would give us a sense of familiarity and a sense of stability in an unsettled, chaotic time. Seeing that same scene you're familiar with every Sunday, I don't know if it did for you, but for me it was helpful. It was a grounding experience. As we continue to move forward, though, we've been in discussions with our leadership, with our staff, and what we've ultimately decided is that if we really want to do our part to make sure that this pandemic is over sooner and affects less people and harms less people, then we have to really take seriously this idea of social distancing. And so what we're going to be doing going forward is everybody will be creating their part of the gathering from their own homes. So I'll be each week delivering a sermon, probably right here in my office, but who knows, wherever I'll find a quiet space. But you'll be seeing me here, giving sermons here, and you will be experiencing some music from Clementine because we have pre-recorded some music in that space that we'll be able to use in our gatherings going forward for the next several weeks. So that will seem familiar as well. But we're going to keep producing these gatherings. They're going to look different, they're going to feel different, but it's still going to be good content, and it's still going to be a place where every Sunday morning we can get together and virtually hug and welcome one another and have some interaction with the people we love in this community so much. So I hope that you will continue to do what you can do to stay safe and stay well, love your neighbor, and we'll get through this. We really will get through this. I want to leave you with one thing before we send you to the gathering. Last night, I was watching the movie Frozen 2 with my kids, and I hadn't paid attention to this part before, apparently. There's this moment where there's this, and please forgive me if I'm messing up the story details here, but there's a troll elder who can see the future. And at this point, he can't see the future, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. And he speaks this line, and I couldn't believe it. It seems so perfect for this season that we're currently in. He said this: "When one can see no future, all one can do is the next right thing." When one can see no future, all one can do is the next right thing. And I think part of what makes this such a challenging time is we don't know when it's going to end, and we don't know when are we going to be back in Clementine together? When are we going to Target again? When are we going to be able to go sit in our favorite coffee shop? When are we not going to have to be afraid that if we go out, we're going to infect somebody? When is that going to happen? We just can't see it right now. All we can do is the next right thing. And we're trying to do that by doing this, by working remotely and still creating content and still sending out things that are going to be helpful. We're still going to be offering midweek Reconstruct at 6:30 on Zoom. I'm going to keep doing, I started last week Tuesdays at 2 on Facebook Live, and we'll do that. And I'll try to add another on Instagram or YouTube. But we're going to be sending things out. There's going to be ways to connect. We're just going to keep doing the next right thing. I know you will too. And so thanks so much for being with us today. And I hope the gathering this morning is helpful, a helpful beginning to Holy Week.
Welcome to Grace Point.
We are a progressive Christian church.
A safe place to deconstruct or reconstruct.
To question and to grow. We are welcoming, affirming, and fully inclusive.
Regardless of age, race,
sexual orientation, gender identity,
physical abilities, or marital or economic status.
We strive to rejoice in our belovedness, serve our community,
respect our differences,
and love each other well.
We are people who accept and value you for you.
We are Grace Point.
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 Grace Point.
Good job.
We are Grace. No, just me.
Oh.
We are Grace Point.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
We found love that never runs dry, from the depths to the sky. Eyes fixed on the one who knows no end. You stand strong for all of time, in the joy, From dawn break into the night, you're here with us, you're on our side. Your arms are forever open wide. You stand strong for all of time, in the joy, in the trial. You are the beginning and the end. Your love goes on, your love goes on. Ever our heart will see your love in everything. From skies to oceans deep, your love goes on. Through every rise and fall, we are forever yours. One thing we know is sure, your love goes on and on and on. Your love unfailing, never shaken, hope awakens in you. 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 Ever our heart will see your love in everything. From skies to oceans deep, your love goes on. Through every rise and fall, we are forever yours. One thing we know is sure, your love goes on and on and on. Ever our heart will see your love in everything. From skies to oceans deep, your love goes on. Through every rise and fall, we are forever yours. One thing we know is sure, your love goes on and on and on.
Well, good morning, Grace Point. We are so glad that you are with us today. We want you to know that we are an affirming, inclusive community, and we hope that you feel loved exactly as you are. If you have not signed up to get our email blast, make sure you go to the Grace Point website. At the very bottom of the homepage, there's a button that says subscribe, so be sure to do that. You can also find us on social media. Speaking of social media, if you will you please take a minute to share the link to this service and also comment and let us know that you're with us today.
Good morning, Grace Point family. I hope you are playing and reading and doing really well. Of course, I miss seeing you and gathering with you in person, but I am so grateful for the pictures and posts so many of you are sharing through social media, as well as the virtual opportunities we have to spend time with one another. Speaking of virtual opportunities, we are hosting Zoom gatherings each week for our GP Kids and GP Youth. GP Youth and GP Youth volunteers join us on Fridays at 7 p.m. to talk all things living life quarantined with those we love so dearly. GP Kids and parents and GP Kids volunteers, you are welcome to join us on Saturdays at noon to say hello and to enjoy a time of show and tell and to play a fun Q&A or would you rather game. And on Thursdays at 7 p.m., I go live with a virtual story time with one of the books from our GP Kids collection. You can interact with those virtual story times through our Grace Point Kids Facebook group or our Grace Point Kids Instagram. And you can find our Grace Point Kids Instagram at Grace Point Kids TN. I hope you'll join us for these special times of connection online. Parents, I have posted this week's discussion guides for our GP Kids and GP Youth on our GP Kids and GP Youth Facebook groups. These have also been emailed out to our Grace Point kids and youth families. Check your email and those pages ever so often to stay informed. If you're not a part of our email list or you're not a part of our Facebook groups, let me know at lisa@gracepoint.net and I'll make sure to include you. Our discussion guides are filled with links to wonderful read aloud books, fun Palm Sunday crafts and activities, as well as wonderful conversation starters. This week's lesson encourages our GP kids to celebrate Palm Sunday by appreciating those around us who provide unconditional love and care to others through their works and acts of service. Our family is so grateful for the folks who deliver our groceries and deliver the packages that come to our home. And so today we're going to show our appreciation to those people by setting aside some time to make a heart-shaped thank you and posting it to our front door. And so many of you are showing love and care to our community through various ways. And I say thank you. Peace out, air hugs, and so much love to each and every one of you.
Good morning, Grace Point. We are so happy that you're with us this morning. We wish we could see you in person, but this is the current new normal. So thank you for choosing to be with us this morning. We're very, very grateful for that. I'm Jason. I'm one of the Leadership Council members, and we have lots of exciting things still happening. Even though we can't get together in person, we have made adjustments and are continuing to make adjustments to provide opportunities for you within our community to get together virtually while we're under the current conditions that are going on out there. The first thing we have this week as we go into Easter week is Reconstruct. That's Wednesday night at 6:30. You can get the Zoom link online through our website. You can also find it on the calendar. You can always get it at gracepoint.net/calendar. All of our events are laid out there with beautiful graphics and all of the information that you'll need. Grace Point Youth, we have a hangout for you Friday night at 7. So you may not be able to go out to a movie, but you can get together online. That's Friday night at 7. You can get the information for that on the Grace Point Youth Instagram page. That's Grace Point Youth TN. So go to Grace Point Youth TN on Instagram. You'll find all of the information there for Friday night's hangout. GP kids, don't worry, we've got time for you too on Saturday set aside. Saturday at noon, you can get together with Miss Lisa online and have a little hangout with her as we get into Easter weekend as well. All of that information is also on the Instagram page. You can go to Grace Point Kids TN for all of that information. So please stay connected with us online. You can always find out what's going on, to plan ahead, carve out some time to get away from work or just your daily lives to take part in some of these other exciting things that we have going on. As we move to a time of giving, we want to let you know that we're here for you. We are here as much as we can be and in as many ways as we can be, and we want to reiterate that to you. You can always let us know confidentially online. Go to gracepoint.net and Community Life, and that will get you to a page where you can share with us if there are things going on in your lives that you would like for us to know about, so we can do our best to help and serve you. Our obligations during these trying times are still what they were before. Quite frankly, we feel an even stronger commitment to our community and to our staff. I can tell you personally, our staff has been working harder than ever before, trying to figure out how we navigate these waters and serve you guys as best we can through these difficult times. And we have an obligation to them, and we could not do this. We could not sustain our mission without your help. We recognize that this is a very tough time for a lot of us, and we don't take that lightly. But for those who are still able to give, we ask you to please partner with us now more than ever. We need your help. The giving, in all transparency, has been down substantially over the last few weeks, and we are planning for that trend to continue for at least the next couple of months. And I want you to know that the Leadership Council and the staff are taking steps to make sure that we're okay. And I promise you that we will be okay. And I know that our community will step up and help us together to keep our mission going. So Thank you for your help. Thank you in any way that you're able to sustain this community. We do not take that lightly. There are a few very easy ways that you can partner with us. The easiest way is to go on gracepoint.net/give. That'll take you directly to a link where you can give online there. You can also just take out your phone and text GracePoint, GracePoint with an E at the end, and text that to 77977. You'll get a link to PushPay, and that'll walk you straight through how to set that up. And that's really the easiest way. If you're still the paper check route, we can do that too. We still have people getting mail for us, so that's not a problem either. But again, we deeply appreciate each and every one of you, no matter how much you can give, whether it's $1 or $100. It does go to sustain the staff, and we deeply, deeply appreciate all of you.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I don't have to earn it because I deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I didn't know, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you gave it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Don't have to earn it because I deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear don't have to earn it because I deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, breathless love of God.
Good morning, Grace Point. It is so good to have you with us today. And today is a significant day in the Christian calendar. Today is Palm Sunday. It begins what is known as Holy Week, where the story of Jesus plays out and the conflicts he had in Jerusalem with the temple authorities and the Roman authorities. And the week ends with Jesus being executed on a Roman cross. And when that happened for Jesus' first followers, the people who followed him into the city, who believed that change was coming, who believed that he was going to be the person that would kick out the Romans and would bring independence and freedom and peace like never before. And instead of all that happening, Jesus ends up naked and bleeding and dying on a Roman cross. This threw them a major curveball. Because in Jesus' world, in the tradition Jesus was a part of, they were expecting a figure, a messianic figure, somebody who would come and be the leader of the revolution. And there were people who came before Jesus who said that they think that they were that person, or somebody thought they were, and they were executed. There were people after Jesus who led uprisings and were proclaimed Messiah, and they were executed. And that's kind of the giveaway. If your Messiah candidate dies, if he's executed by the empire, then you know that that's not the Messiah. And yet something happens in the Jesus story. He's executed by the empire. And then 3 days later on Easter, the news gets disseminated that he's not there, that he's been raised up, that he's going to be doing something in the world. And that experience transformed. Usually, a messianic figure dies, the disciples that they have, the followers, they disperse and they go about their business. These followers ended up spreading a message throughout the entire known world about this particular messianic would-be Messiah figure. And so the Jesus story transformed their understanding of what kind of figure they were waiting on. And it actually transformed their understanding of what a cross meant. So for the early Christians, the cross would have been before Jesus, before Easter, because their understanding of this all developed after Easter. Before Easter, the cross would have been the equivalent of, like when we wear it around our necks, it would be the equivalent of wearing an electric chair around your neck. Right? It's not something you would celebrate. It's not a symbol that you would want to hold on to. And yet after Easter, something happened that it transformed their understanding of the cross, so much so that one early Christian writer who was well known and had a major influence on the movement, a guy named Paul, he actually would sum up his Jesus story in 2 words: Christ crucified. That's how he talked about it. That's how he talked about the Jesus story. In 1 Corinthians 2:1-2, he says this to this community in Corinth: "When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I didn't come preaching God's secrets to you like I was an expert in speech or wisdom. I had made up my mind not to think about anything while I was with you, except Jesus Christ and to preach him as crucified." Something happens that transforms their understanding of what Jesus' death was. It began with disciples on a road to Emmaus saying, "Gosh, we thought he was the one," and being heartbroken that he's dead and gone. And then a short time later, you have this guy, Paul, going, "Yeah, I resolved to know nothing else but Jesus crucified, Christ crucified." So after that moment, though, after the Easter moment, nobody was sitting around developing theologies. Everybody was out doing stuff. They were actually just making it up as they went along. But after some time passed, people began to wonder, okay, but what does Jesus' death mean? Because it happened, and then he was raised up. But what do we do with that? What does the death has to mean something? So they'd ask questions like, what does Jesus' death mean? What did it accomplish? Did it accomplish something? How does it actually work if it did? How does the death of Jesus work to accomplish a thing? And when you're talking about that, you are fully immersed in the world of atonement theology. Atonement essentially is a word that literally means to cover over, but it's about reconciliation, making peace where peace has been broken. And you may think of it like this. A lot of people say in the word atonement, you can break it up into at-one-ment, right? It's about bringing people back together, restoring a relationship. And so in atonement theory, what people are trying to do is figure out, how does Jesus' death somehow repair our relationship with God? That's what the whole thing's about. And they came up, there are several atonement theories. There's some that are more popular than others. One of the earliest atonement theories, which is present in the earliest church fathers, is known as the ransom theory. I don't know if you're familiar with the ransom theory, but it's essentially this: they believed that because of the sin of Adam and Eve in the garden, which we learned last week actually was never called sin, whatever. So because humans fell, they fell into the clutches of Satan. And in order to get them back from Satan, God has to pay a ransom to Satan. And the ransom ends up being Jesus, but spoiler alert, it didn't work, because God rescues us from Satan and then Jesus comes back from the dead, right? That's essentially if you want to think of it as like a silent movie, you know, the one where the villain is tied somebody up and lays them on the train tracks and the train is coming and you're waiting for, that's sort of ransom theory in a nutshell. It's this belief that somehow God is trying to pay off Satan. And so you can see that was an early church theory, first, second century, and not a lot of people hold on to that. There are others that have been developed. The Christus Victor theory of atonement believes that what happens at the cross is Jesus defeats the powers and principalities and shows them to be bankrupt morally. There's one that's probably the most famous and the favorite of a lot of people in the circles I grew up in conservative evangelical circles, and that is the satisfaction theory that also ends up morphing into penal substitutionary atonement, which means that God is so offended by our sin, we have so offended God's honor, that God can't even deal with us, and honor has to be paid back, right? Anselm was in a feudal society, so he thought in terms of lords and serfs, and there's an honor debt. And so how does God's honor get repaired? Because we've damaged God's honor. Well, something has to die. God must get restitution. But none of us, because we're all terrible, none of us can pay that restitution. But who can? Boom, the innocent Jesus, Son of God, comes in, is crucified. God's wrath is satiated by the death of Jesus, and now God can love us and accept us if we pray the right prayer and do all the right stuff, right? Now, that's sort of the theory most of us grew up with. That was in the late 1000s that was developed by a guy named Anselm. At the same time, there's another guy named Abelard who believed that this theory was terrible, and he came up with a theory called the moral influence theory, which is essentially says that the cross is God demonstrating God's love for the world. And that the hope is that when the world sees God's love being displayed in that way, that it will move them, transform them, and pull them closer to the divine. But here's the problem I have. Atonement is a solution without a problem. And here's what I mean. Atonement begins with the understanding that we are separated from God, that we are bad, separated, disconnected. God is over here and we're over here. And one of the things we've kind of discovered on this journey is that actually the opposite is true. We are inherently united with God. We are as connected to God as a fish is to water. There is no way to separate us from God. And so if we're going around trying to figure out how do I repair my relationship with God when I'm separated from God, if you're not separated, it's a solution without a problem, which then creates a whole other problem, because this has sort of been the comfortable way people have talked about Jesus' death for years and years and years. How can we understand Jesus' death in a way that still makes it meaningful? Because I'll tell you, as a pastor for almost 20 years, 15 of those, I was in my own sort of faith unraveling where I couldn't make sense of anything. This week that leads up to Good Friday and Easter Sunday was torture. I would rather it be a random Sunday in July than Holy Week, because I didn't know what to say about it. And I think that in the progressive Christian world, we know that we can't hold on to what our beliefs were about it before. We know we've got to let some of that go. But what do we do with it? I mean, the cross is a central piece of the Christian story. It was a 2-word phrase that Paul used to sum up his entire Jesus message: Christ crucified. So what are we going to do with it? I think we actually can do some stuff with it. I think that it still has something to give. The death of Jesus is still meaningful, just not maybe in the ways that we thought. And I think we should begin here. Jesus' death was not for God. God did not need Jesus to die, right? Why would she need Jesus to die? Can you imagine if you were to be at my house and one of my kids drops something and breaks it and they say, Dad, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but you've offended me and now I need that restitution, so somebody's got to die. I mean, I hope you would call the authorities because that sounds crazy, right? And yet this is the God we've been taught to believe in, this God who needs innocent blood to be spilled to somehow be okay with us. And what's more, that doesn't actually ever pop up in the Bible. Nowhere do we really read the Bible saying, and God demands innocent blood to be spilled so God can somehow love human beings again. We got that from Anselm, not from the Bible. Jesus' death wasn't for God. Jesus was not a substitute for us. That's not what was happening. Jesus wasn't, maybe this is the right question. Was Jesus' death necessary? No, Jesus' death was not necessary. Jesus' death did not somehow make you and I suddenly more lovable. Like God looked at us on Thursday and said, you guys are horrible, but on Friday he's like, okay, now you're all right. Like that's not how that worked. You have always been united with God and you have always been beloved by God. God has always embraced you. The message of the cross is not, oh, well, now God can finally love us again or embrace us again or have fellowship with us again. The cross is set as a reminder, no, God has always embraced you. God has always been present to you. You have always lived, moved, and existed in God. Jesus' death was not necessary. I actually think Jesus' death, though, was inevitable. And here's what I mean by that. You ride into Jerusalem at the most politically charged time of the year, Passover, where you're having a massive festival with all sorts of out-of-town people coming in to celebrate a God who liberates slaves while you are currently being oppressed by the empire. And you ride into town in a sort of a mocking parade of what a Roman emperor would do or a Roman general. They would have this big parade with war horses and weapons, and they'd be showing their strength. And here comes Jesus on a donkey with some of his disciples, right? Like he's sort of poking fun at the whole empire. And then he goes into the temple and symbolically shuts it down and judges it for, instead of providing a place for wholeness and healing, it's become a hiding place for people who want to use their religion against other people. And then you go challenge the leaders day after day after day. Like, I think, honestly, at the end of the week, Jesus and his disciples are having their last meal, and it's sort of a secretive location, and they slip out under the cover of dark. I mean, why does Jesus need to be betrayed? Because, I think they were trying to keep, things were getting rough. It was tough. People were looking for them. And I think there was part of them that was like, hey, let's try to keep a low profile to get through the weekend. And that's not exactly what happens. Was Jesus' death necessary? No. God did not need Jesus to die to love us or save us. Was Jesus' death inevitable? Yeah. When you go into Jerusalem on the most politically charged week of the year and you make claims about God's kingdom over and against Caesar's kingdom, there's one way that's going to go. And Jesus struggled with that. In Gethsemane, he wept. He asked for the cup to be passed away from him to someone else. And yet he ends up drinking the cup. His death wasn't for God. I do think we often talk about Jesus' death and sin. Here's what I think. I think Jesus' death was about sin, singular. So if you were with us last week, we talked about sin, singular, and sins, plural. Sins, plural, usually gets most of our attention. But sins, plural, ultimately are just symptoms of this larger thing called sin, singular. And what we sort of drilled down on last week was that this idea of sin, singular, is essentially what happens when we live beneath our good humanity. Right? Our humanity was created and called good. We are image bearers of the divine. And when we dehumanize and hate and commit acts of violence, we are below our humanity. And so we talked about sin singular as being what happens and comes out of us when we want to dehumanize and abuse and wound another human being. I think Jesus' death was exactly about that. I think if you look at the story of Jesus' death, Jesus bears dehumanization on the cross. He's been humiliated. He's been beaten up. He's hanging naked, bleeding, humiliated, defeated, dehumanized. And what does he do in return? What is Jesus' response to dehumanization? He bears it, and he turns it into love, and he pushes it back out. The prayer from the cross, Father, forgive them. This is a man being dehumanized who refuses to dehumanize his killers. Which means that in death, Jesus was far more alive than the people killing him. Because dehumanization and hatred and all of that stuff that goes with it, violence, it's not something that somebody who's super grounded and feels super whole and healthy are going to engage in, right? Jesus on the cross bears the dehumanization that people still bear today. That people who are mistreated, who are ridiculed, who are essentially kept out because of any number of things that whoever the gatekeepers are says is the thing that keeps you out, right? Like there are people all over the world who still experience this dehumanization, and Jesus does something powerful and profound. He turns that, he takes it, he absorbs it, he turns it into love, and he extends it to the very people who are wounding him. There's this great line in Paul where chapter earlier than we looked before, chapter 1, where he's writing to the church in Corinth and he's talking about the cross, and he says this: the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are being destroyed, but it is the power of God for those of us who are being saved. Now, when he says destroyed, what does he mean? I think we are like over spiritualizing it. I think what he's talking about is some of the very stuff Jesus talked about in his life before he died, that when you choose to resist violently, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And so to people who choose the path of violence and dehumanization, the cross looks like defeat. It looks foolish. It looks weak. And yet in his death, Jesus is far stronger than those who are killing him. The cross is this moment where Jesus reveals the absolute bankruptcy of hate, dehumanization, and violence. And he does so all the while not turning it and giving it back to the people who gave it to him. You know what I think ultimately has happened? I think that we have created a God in our image. And we've kind of given that God power. And in doing so, we've lost the true transformative power of the cross. The transformative power of the cross is not, think about this. Has anybody seen, you can respond to me in the comments, I guess. Has anybody seen the picture of like muscled up Jesus, and he's like broken the cross and now he's like standing there all muscled up? And people will often say, yeah, the first time he came like a lion, the second time he's gonna come like a lamb. And that's a lion, first time a lamb, second time a lion. And here's what's interesting about that. In the text in Revelation where it says, I looked and I saw the Lion of the tribe of Judah, what's interesting is when they look at the lion, like when because there's a camera, when it pans over to see the Lion of the tribe of Judah, it is a slain lamb. The lion is the lamb. Strength is never in beating, defeating, dehumanizing, abusing, wounding. Strength is not doing those things. And instead, even to the very people who are trying to hand them to you, transforming them into love and giving it to the world. I think that's what's happening with Jesus. Jesus, you may put it like this: Jesus really does die because of sin, because of dehumanization, because of violence, because of fear, because of power, because of greed. He strolls into an economic, political, religious system that is working really well for the people on the top, and he says, let's tear the whole thing down. And he gets a cross for it. Jesus doesn't die for God. God already loved you and embraced you way before that. Jesus isn't dying for all of our individual sins, but human sin, the dehumanization, the violence, is what puts Jesus on the cross. And I want to end with this. So what do we do with the cross? What do we do with it? How do we embrace it as part of a progressive Christian lens to see the world? And here's what I think. I think Jesus is ultimately calling us to participation. So the line, when I survey the wondrous cross, the point was never to survey the wondrous cross. The point was always to pick up a cross and follow Jesus. That's what he actually says, right, to his disciples. If you want to really follow me, you want to be my disciple, grab your cross and follow me. Now, here's what I don't think he's saying. I don't think he's saying to us we all have to go out and somehow get ourselves arrested and beaten up. I don't think that's what Jesus means. I think what the cross represents is, and of course, Jesus actually does go carry a cross and die on it, and some of his followers do too, right? So there's always a risk in there. But I think what he's ultimately saying is the work of love is hard. The work of peacemaking is hard. The work of personal transformation and societal transformation is hard. And everything in us at times seems to want to pull us in the other direction. It's so much easier to dehumanize somebody. It's so much easier to make fun of somebody. It's so much easier to lob hate at somebody than to actually enter into their story, to hear about their wounds and who they are and journey with them toward transformation. That's hard work. And I think when Jesus says, grab your cross, I think part of what he's saying is pick up whatever it means for you to go into the world as an agent of love. Knowing that sometimes love looks like being nailed to a cross. Knowing that you will never enter into love with anyone or anything that doesn't cost something. And that for Christians, the point has never just been Jesus' cross. It's been all of our crosses. Ultimately, the cross is not a doctrine to debate. It is a path to follow. It is not a theory about how we can go to heaven, but it's a practical way to bring heaven to earth. What Jesus is inviting us to, as we approach Good Friday, we remember the death of Jesus, body broken, love poured in love for the world. But we don't merely remember Jesus. We remember that for us to be on the Jesus path, to be a Christian, whatever language you want to use, to be a Christian is to be on that journey too. The cross is not Jesus's alone. It's ours. And it is far easier for us to stand back and worship Jesus than it is for us to join Jesus on the dusty path toward the cross. But according to Paul, what looks foolish is actually life. What looks unadvisable, right, is actually the way the world will be transformed. Not through our might, not through our, I think I mentioned maybe I can be a really sarcastic person sometimes, and sometimes things come out and people get hurt. That's not how the world's going to be changed. The world is not going to be fixed by one more witty comment from me, right? But the world will be transformed when we all take up love and carry it into the world on the Jesus path. Not because Jesus was killed by God to do something for us and we should be really grateful, but because in Jesus we see what God is like. And we see a love that is overflowing all the categories and boxes and labels and all the dams we build to try to hold this love back. It continually pushes through. And the question we have to ask this week, Holy Week, Jesus is journeying to Jerusalem. He is journeying toward the cross. Will we journey with him? Or will we choose another path? And our afterlife may not depend on what we choose, but this life will depend on what we choose. Will we build a life that is love lived out, or will we keep revenge and violence and hate and dehumanization? Will we keep that in circulation? We get to choose. And that's what the Jesus story is asking us to do, to choose. Not where we're going to spend eternity, but about how we're going to live in this world as divine image bearers of God. Thank you so much for being with us for our gathering this week. I hope that the way we tried to reframe the understanding of Jesus' death was helpful. If you're like me and that has been one of those things that as you've transitioned in your faith that you didn't really know where to put it, I hope that this was a good beginning to that conversation. You can also join us at Reconstruct Wednesday night at 6:30 on Zoom, and we'll dive into that a little bit more there, I'm sure. A couple of things. If you need, I know Jason mentioned this earlier, if you need any sort of pastoral care or you need to let us know anything, you can either email us or you can go to the community life page on gracepoint.net and you can fill it out there. And if there's anything else we can do, if you need pastoral care and if you need just somebody to talk to, whatever's going on, don't hesitate to reach out, Grace Point. We love you and we're here for you, and we can't wait to celebrate Easter with you next week. And so until then, wash your hands, 20 seconds, socially distant, but relationally close. Grace and peace be with you.